Discovered our quality talk shows. It's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep...
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Hey, greetings and salutations, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. Judy WTF Show, here live on every Thursday at 8 o'clock. We broadcast from the heart of Hollywood. And tonight we have a very special show, as usual. And this is a call-in show, so if you'd like to call in, feel free to do that.
Didn't we already have a call-in? That was fantastic.
Yeah, they called in before the show, so
wow.
It's like they're gone. So
I'm
call back.
impressed. Please do.
Our number is area code 323-284-7826. That's 323-284-7826. The title of our show today is regarding happiness. And I promise that we're going to have a happy ending, because what we do at the end of every show is we shrink that tune. We take a popular song, and Judy reads it. I read it. Judy interprets it through her mind map, something she developed well over a decade ago, and then we play the song, and it's a lot of fun. So, and we take all requests. So if you want to send us a request to a Song Shrunk, or if you want to unload or explode, it's info@drjudywtf.com. And I'm your host, Walt Luskin. Dr. Judy Rosenberg is always here. Hey, Doctor.
Hello, Walt. Thank you very much for that. And this is the continuation of the Hole in the Soul series. And I want to talk a little bit about how that hole in the soul is formed and the concept of happiness and what we mean by happiness, because I think everybody has their own definition of happiness. What's it mean to be happy? Oh, well, I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to have a call-in, because the whole concept of the hole in the soul has to do with the fact that we are so disconnected from. As a human race, we are disconnected from. And ultimately, what we're yearning for is the same thing we were always yearning for, and that begins at the very beginning.
Absolutely, with the ultimate connection.
Yes, it begins with mother-infant connection. And if that connection isn't laid down properly, if there's not that mother-infant bond, if that time period doesn't go well for the infant, and now research is showing that it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years, at least 18 months, and then some, to lay the groundwork of trust, to lay the groundwork of a healthy core sense of self. And if that does not go well for us as a human race, or individually for those out there and us in here, then we go symptomatic. And one of the ways in which I work is I like to take the symptoms and play psychological detective,
yes,
and connect the dots, and use the symptoms as a hieroglyphics, if you will, to understand what happened way back in the pre-verbal section of life, which is during that first 0 from birth on up till 2-3 years of life. And so when we talk about the concept of happiness, I like to look at it from the lens of the mind map, which if you have
the mind map is something Dr. Judy developed well over 12 years ago, and you can go, if those of you who are listening this on Stitcher or iTunes, you can go to www.drjudywtf.com and see her mind map. It's got 9 panels, 3 panels each of from, through, to. And we'll pop it up here for those of you who
thank you. So I just want to give a little bit of a background on that. Actually, the mind map was conceived in a conversation I had with a friend of mine back in, I think it was 2001 or so. And the conversation had to do with the fracturing of the human race. And I was so excited to hear these words come out of my mouth that went something like, "Isn't it time that we come together as a united humanity?" So the conception of the mind map came to me because I really was interested in healing the isms that we fractured into. All of the
And
the
what
different,
what are isms?
well, the isms are all the ways in which we divide from each other. Judaism, Catholicism, racism, social classes, different economic classes, and so on, different political systems. I call them isms. Now, if we can grow within the ism and share our ism and interconnect and find ways to feed the human race through our isms, that's one thing. But oftentimes what happens is that we clash in our isms and we become really fragmented. And so I decided to put that aside on the back burner and concentrate on healing human disconnect, which is where the isms come from on a macro level in the first place. And I decided to go back to the micro level and take a look at attachment theory, John Bowlby material, and a lot of what's happening in our current field of psychology today. I went to a wonderful seminar a few weeks ago on attachment theory.
At UCLA.
Yes, and I feel really privileged to be in Dr. Walter Brockelman's study group now on furthering the body of knowledge and having the opportunity to speak to my colleagues about their thoughts. And I'm always wanting to learn. And actually, it comes down to attunement. It comes down to relationships and how they heal and don't heal, and how we sometimes enter into relationships and we get wounded because there are a lot of layers to this. And one of the layers is that when the relationship with the primary doesn't go well, we have what's known in our field as narcissistic injuries, an injury to the self.
I hate it when that happens.
I know.
Those of you who are new to the show, just kind of put this in a little perspective. Your relationship with your mother that you had early on is probably a reflection of your inner world, and the relationship you did or did not have with your father is a reflection of your outer world. And if you had very little relationship with either as your caregiver, then you are in what Judy calls the double dungeon.
Right. So if you look at panel one,
the mind map, as Judy's learning, is really, I believe, on the bleeding edge.
The bleeding edge. Well, hopefully nobody will get hurt in the process
of
using the mind map.
But blood, sweat, and tears, and the bleeding edge of the theory.
So if any of you are near a computer or want to later go to a computer, you can see it up there at
on the internet, www.drjudywtf.com.
Yes, and so really what it is a way of seeing the process of the formation of the problem, the dismantling of the problem, and the shifting into solutions. So if you go to panel one, we're really talking about the process of the wound, and then how we react to the wound, and then how we encode the wound into the fiber of our very being. It becomes
our DNA, and at that point, it becomes so much a part of us. Many times we try to protect it, coddle it, and even though we were much better off without the wound, it causes challenges.
And I call it the psychological DNA because it's an encoding that oftentimes shows up as a negative core belief or set of core beliefs. And so once that wound is initiated, and what I mean by the wound is that if we don't get the narcissistic supplies, in other words, the emotional supplies we need to self-soothe, to self-regulate, then things go awry for us. They go into chaos. So those ingredients are touch, breastfeeding, consistency with the primary caretaker, and now we're seeing that when the father is absent and not nurturing the mother, that has a profound effect on the mother, and she feels let down herself and unsupported.
Projects that onto the child.
Yes. Okay. So if the mother's not attuning to the child, if the mother is either emotionally absent or physically absent, and of course there are different levels of this. If the mother is out and out abusive, physically abusive, then the wound gets opened, and then the infant reacts to the wound. And this is all pre-verbal, so it's not like the infant could say, "Mom,
Right.
stop it!
It's
You're
not-
hurting
it's
me.
not like they're able to express
watch
this
your
and say,
boundaries."
I need all they right.
Right.
It's-
So this is all happening in the subterfuge. This is all in the unconscious,
Subterfuge.
right? And that's why it's so hard for clinicians to access this material, because
Yep.
you can't know what you don't know because you don't have the words. And now brain research is saying that the brain doesn't even, the cognitive brain, the memory doesn't even go online until later on. And so that infant is storing this information on a very somatic
While you want to
level.
let that, we have a call in. So,
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
hey, thanks for calling. You are on the air with Dr. Judy. Thanks for getting on the couch.
Oh, hi there.
Hello.
Hi.
Sonia.
Hi,
Hi,
Sonia.
Sonia.
Hello?
Yes, we could hear you.
Oh, I should actually turn you guys off on the radio. Hi there, this is Sonia. And I wrote a book about happiness because my father was a happiness researcher. And
Oh, yay.
a
I
friend of
heard
mine
about
was a
you.
happiness therapist. Oh, perfect. You know what?
I was hoping that you'd call.
Oh, yeah. My friend Valerie Garrett, who's a terrific therapist, she spoke very highly of you and of your show. And I love what I heard so far, especially when it comes to happiness in relationships. I thought that was very profound what you said.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that you've done a lot of research on the subject, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how you would define happiness, being that you're writing on it and you're so involved. And by the way, please tell your friend thank you for referring you to call in today. Really,
Yeah,
really appreciate
we
that.
do.
Perfect. Yeah, I definitely will. As for, I've definitely done a lot of research, and I also work in an institute, and it has been an interesting approach since I approach it more from an actor's point of view, because I think when it comes to acting, which is profoundly about relationships to yourself and to other people, that's a really good tool to get close to what the core of happiness is. And happiness, just to say it really in a nutshell, we often confuse things that make us happy with what happiness actually is.
Yes.
And happiness is a process within ourselves.
I love that.
But for that process to actually come to fruition, we often need other people, and relationships are key. And what you mentioned about relationships to parents, which are this is our core, even before we're even born. These relationships and these patterns in our brain are really formed and supported, and this is why happiness is so connected to relationships, because relationships are one of the main thing that makes us happy.
That's so
That's a good way to
true,
put it.
Sonia, because as we've said, no person is an island.
And I love your background, the fact that you
Exactly.
act, because one of the people that is trained in the mind map system is my assistant and life coach, Joshua Galitsky, who is helping me write the book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which is all the body of work that I'm talking about, the mind map
And
and
it'll
the
be out
entire process.
soon,
and
very
yes,
soon.
and case studies and so on.
Wow.
And so he actually has a master's in theater, and I love it because part of the work that I do is actually bringing into the therapeutic environment truth conversations between the patient and the mother or the father, and oftentimes we don't have the parent there, nor should they be, because they don't know how to empathically attune to the person, and often and mostly re-injure the person in the process. So what we do in this enactment, which is really acting, is, for example, I will play the part of mother or father, and then the person who has suppressed all of their truths and is now symptomatic as a result of it will bring up the sense memory.
They'll react to that.
Right. They'll bring up their sense
rather
memory.
rapidly, actually.
Right. And all of their feelings, because part of what we talk about every episode is don't implode, don't explode, unload. Right. So
Yeah.
if they're able to unload in a safe environment where they're really, really heard and attuned and empathized with, then what I watch happen very rapidly, and this is why I really love this process so much, is because I see really, really quick results. And I'm always looking for a better mousetrap to trap pathology and to help people to take the psychological poison out of their system, if you will. And I think that acting is a remarkable way to get to the authenticity and not only verbalize it, but use the body to expel the emotions. So that this is a tool that I want to use more and more in my work. So if you want to join us as a life coach, well,
I'd love to, because I really believe it was interesting. I came to this whole subject through like a personal tragedy, my father's death. So for me, it was like, how can I process this? And acting was like for me an integral part to sort of see how I could gain access to this. Because how could I, with all the research and figuring out what happiness is, because happiness is a really simple process. What is complicated is figuring out what makes us happy and what the circumstances are and what our
you're so true, Sonia.
patterns are.
There was a book that I read 20 years ago. It was entitled Happiness is a Choice. And that title alone always makes me realize that, it's how we act or react to what's going on around us. And we can choose to be happy or not.
If we have a choice. I do have to say, and this is one of my pet peeves, when it comes to things like relationships, like these things that are often like even unconscious, where there's this landmark experiment where little kids, where the mother is leaving a little kid in a room, and then the kids were like used to the mother a lot. They stay and it's no problem at all. And the kids were like, there's all these different types of people when it comes to how the mother's relationship is. So there's a lot of things working where I think we do not have a choice
and I
when we're happy.
I agree with you, because when there is that profound disconnect, it's really, really hard to pop into this this happy state, and we're left with what I call licking our emotional wounds. And when we're licking our emotional wounds and we're feeling unsafe, and a patient of mine the other day said something like, oh my God, if my mother was a role model for the highest level of connection in the world, then, what's left for me? And I said, exactly, there's your blueprint. The blueprint states that abuse, disconnect, lack of attunement, no breastfeeding, not much touch, and then later criticism and more abuse. If that's your role model, and then new people float into your life through the course of life, then what are you going to project on them? I mean, does it, are you supposed to think that they're going to be better than that? And so I'm with you in the sense that we're dealt a deck of cards, and so the way I play this deck of cards with everybody is that I look at the symptom or the symptoms, and then we take a look at the connect the dot cues that point back to the original injury, and then we have a series of truth conversations, because these are the things that the baby couldn't say. These are the things that the child couldn't say because the child wasn't safe enough to talk. Now, how do you say to your mother, you bitch? I feel like killing you, or worse. And I've had people, I'm telling you, you would really love some of this process, because I have had people have actual revenge fantasies, not to blame, shame, and destroy parents, but just to simply get the poison out, because when you've been injected with that much negativity, well, you tell me, where does it go?
Yeah, the scenarios that Judy shared with me a time or two was like, wow, this is scarier than some movies. And as Judy says, is childhood is a hostage situation.
It is, in a way. Yeah, you get exposed. I did want to say something about choice, though, because I love that you said that happiness is a choice, and I would have to add to that, I think in a way it is. Because what is a choice, and I think we have to really distinguish the difference between being content, being balanced, having everything being fine, as opposed to that high feeling that happiness is. And I think what's so difficult in our society is that we expect that this high feeling is something that is it is going to continuously be a high, which by definition, it can't be, like a process by definition can't just have a high point. It can't just have a climax. So I think the way I sort of like rephrased it, is that, what we do have a choice is exactly what you said, to sort of see what the kind of the deck of cards we're dealt, and like what we can make out of it. And then maybe we'll find some happiness in there, maybe we'll find other things, but what we can really choose to be is to be content and to be a balanced human being.
Well, you're right, and if you said there what we make of it, again, it's a choice of how we react.
And what you're saying is that these highs are not sustainable.
No,
they're absolutely, who can be that high all the time? And of course, the people who want to get involved in heavy drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and then they crash, and then they want to pick it back up again. And as I grow older, and yes, I am growing older.
No, Judy is growing better.
Yeah,
we all are, right?
Yeah, every second of the
human,
day.
If you're human, you're going to grow older.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's only one solution I know to that one, okay? And I'm not taking it. And so the thing about sustainability is that, what I wanted to say about growing older and hopefully a little wiser is that I really love the idea, because, I'm a human being just like everyone else, and I have happy highs, and then I get very low, and the model that I created is really about the darkness and the light and the shadows, and that even when we are in the light, there's always the shadows, which a lot of therapists have different names for, the dark side and so on. It's always looming, and we sometimes get caught in the undertow of it. But I think as I'm growing older, I like the idea of getting wiser. I like the idea of leading a satisfying life. Sometimes that doesn't mean a happy life, and sometimes there are many days where I'm not particularly happy. However, I try to concentrate on having a satisfying day where perhaps I'm making a difference in another person's life, or I'm uncovering something that I didn't know about myself, or even more simply than that, I'm just looking into the eyes of my grandson or my dogs and holding their paws and breathing with them, or doing something, just that basic and simple. And that's becoming more and more attractive to me than having this happy high and trying to sustain that.
And you touched on something that is real. The real key in a lot of ways to happiness is you said that what really gives you satisfaction, in a way makes you content and fulfills you, is that you do something for others.
That's a very big key.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, that's vital.
That is just a vital point, because happiness is also so selfish, because it's within us, it's me, whereas giving to others and making others happy is, that's wonderful.
Well, if you do go to my website, you'll see that my logo is actually 3 interconnected circles. And so you're right on target with my philosophy, which is that when you share the light with other people and they share it with you, and there's a sense of interconnectedness, then 1 + 1 in those situations becomes more than just 2. It creates something bigger and something that's of the light, something of a sharing nature. And I think that is the joy for me, is when that experience between 2 people occurs. The sharing, the mutual sharing, and then something bigger it results from that. And I do want to say that as I expand the mind map system, and I want to translate it into many languages and take it out to other nations, I will be training people into the system, people who are natural-born healers, natural-born therapists, psychologists, people who are interested in making a difference. And I really appreciate your call.
Yeah, Sonia, thanks so much for
please,
calling.
Be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so
for
much.
your show.
Thanks for listening, and call again.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes, definitely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You talk about in different languages and whatnot in terms of your mind map, and you've written a fiction book entitled Illusive Darkness, which actually part of it takes place in Egypt. So you've already kind of
in the
laid
Gaza
the groundwork.
City, Gaza City,
yeah.
and just
so it has an international flair already.
And it's going back online. I took it offline for a bit and making some changes to it, and I'm going to have it back online on Amazon and Kindle. And the theme of it is very much the theme that I talk about here, Walt and I talk about, which is the theme of sometimes we have to enter the darkness to get to the light.
Yes, you do. That's the byline of the book.
Right. And sometimes we have to look for points of interconnection and relatability in relationships, because as our theme song, which is The Matrix.
It's the theme song to The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, yes.
Right. What I'm beginning to see, and I'm so impressed with the current field of psychology. I'm impressed because now they're really recognizing that relationships heal and that we live in an interconnected matrix or web of relationships. It's just kind of ironic to me that Walt, without even knowing that or necessarily
well, it was
having that in mind.
subconscious at its finest. Yes.
I think so. It was one of those coincidence that I love so well.
Coincidence.
Yes.
Okay. I like that. You are listening to Dr. Judy WTF here on the UBN Network. If you want to catch us on a podcast, you sure can. We are on Stitcher, and we are climbing the charts on Stitcher, surprisingly. Thank you. And, of course, iTunes. And then, of course, you can pull it here at ubnradio.com as well. And we are a call-in show. We just had one, so it's not too late to call in if you want to express something about happiness or even unhappiness. And the number is area code 323-284-7826.
And I think, too, we talk a lot about disconnect and connect, and we're now living in an era of cell phones and all kinds of ways that we connect and disconnect from each other.
Yep.
And there's less eye contact. There still is less skin-to-skin contact than ever before. Divorce rates are way up there. And as I understand, people are getting less and less tolerant of any imperfections in anyone. Look at the plastic surgery business, right? We can't be unperfect.
Yeah.
So this happiness that we're talking about is really on multi levels.
It is, and we've done a show on plastic surgery in the previous show. If you want to talk about that, we addressed the concept of Botox, which was a little more scarier than I thought. And another one we've dealt with as a previous show was on divorce, and it turns out the divorce of the graying age of people over the 50 is somewhat higher than other ages. I mean, you're right. You get older, and it's like, hey, man, if this is all I've got, if this is as good as it's going to get, I'm willing to be alone than stay in this relationship.
Yeah, and how many times do we hear the word, I'm so unhappy? Well, what are you so unhappy? I'm so unhappy in my marriage. I'm so unhappy with the way my kid is behaving. I'm so unhappy with my hair. I'm so unhappy with my outfit today. It's just like I'm so unhappy. And so we have to make the distinction between a state of mind and what occurs on a day-to-day basis, these fluctuations. And so one of the things that I like to talk about is the state of doing versus the state of being.
And there's some articles I've pulled along those lines.
Go for it.
Actually, if I can find it.
Great.
But I wanted to start first, since Judy is originated from Montreal. The title article is Happiness is a State of Being that has nothing to do with the acquisition of things. And it says here, Montrealers are considered the second happiest people in the world, according to a renowned travel guide, Lonely Planet. No other Canadian city made the list. The first one was Vanuatu, a South Pacific paradise.
Oh.
So we'll be sure
Gotta
to
go there.
Gotta go there.
Okay.
So, but this says, money, status, or material things cannot bring you happiness. Happiness is a state of mind. Although my father was apt to saying that money cannot buy happiness, but it can sure take the edge off sorrow.
Very much so. And I just want to say something about my experience having lived in Montreal. I moved there when I was about 9 months old. And I could say truly that it was one of the happiest periods of my life because we played out in the street. We got dirty. I lived in a 2-bedroom small apartment. We were really poor, but I didn't know it. We were immigrants from Hungary, but who knew what that really meant? All I knew is that I loved to sit on the sidewalk and suck on popsicles and have stuff drip down my elbow and my tongue turn blue or red, no depending on what flavor I was eating. And I had a bunch of friends just out on the street. We played hockey in the wintertime on the ice, although I didn't. I probably just like made snow angels or something. And I think what it was that we really were interconnected as a community.
Absolutely.
And we sat out on the balcony and played cards with our neighbors. And now I live in Sherman Oaks, and it is very, very beautiful. I live in a much more beautiful home than I did back in Montreal, but I don't see any children out in the streets, and my neighbors and I have a lot of space between us, and it's just, I can
It's
see why
different. I mean,
Montreal is kind of a buzzing, fun city.
I mean, back in the day, you didn't stay inside and do Nintendo or play with a Wii or go zone out with your iPod and or go play with your iPad. And,
Right.
So I mean, that's it. That's what it's all about. Happiness is a state of being. It's what you feel inside on a consistent basis. Merely acquiring new things or experiencing the situations you live through on a day-to-day basis cannot change true happiness. Many millionaires are very, very unhappy, and many poor people across the world are the happiest people alive. When people come to this realization, then and only then can they truly be happy. Betty Davis says, you can never be happier than you expect. To change your happiness, change your expectations.
And I was reading, actually I saw a tape, and I really wish I can remember his name. He's a monk that was I believe a biochemist initially, and he went to meditate up in the Himalayan mountains. And he was a French monk, I do remember that. I think his name was Matthew something, and I will look this up because it was really so interesting to me. And he talked about doing in the state of being, and when we're in the doing and the ups and downs of happiness, then we're just bouncing like little bouncing balls. However, there are people who spend a lot of conscious energy on meditating and connecting to source energy. And these people who are mindful and meditative and connect themselves to a body of peace find that they're not as subject to the ups and downs of the daily ebbs and flows of life.
It would imply
and there's
that
a steadiness within them.
There's a steady. It would imply that actually that's one of the things in one article or pull. If you meditate and you're connected to yourself,
Yes.
and more attuned to yourself,
Yes.
then that means you're more able to be attuned to what's around you and those others. If you're not attuned and connected to yourself, again, human disconnected we talk so much about, then it's more difficult to be connected with others.
And so actually the model of the mind map is a psycho-spiritual model. I don't always talk about that because some people are atheists, some people are agnostics, some people are spiritual, and it ultimately it doesn't matter because the process works. And one of the aspects of it being a psycho-spiritual model is that when we have these wounds from childhood, then we don't know where to turn. And ultimately, when we're infants and we turn inwards, then we find that it's that emptiness, that hole in the soul, because we weren't nurtured. So there's nothing really substantial in there.
And as a result of that, we aren't able to self-soothe.
Correct. So if there's the break in the mother-infant and the infant father, the relationship there, then there are lots of breaks. There's that break, and then there's a break between the self to the self. Okay, so we're not cohesive within ourselves, and then we're not cohesive in relationships, and so then we're not cohesive globally. So you can see the little pebble in the pond. You throw a little pebble in, and it reverberates from mother-infant to mother-infant-father to self, and then the breakdown of the self and the breakdown of the relationships and the breakdown of our communities and so on out. So one of the things that I'm really also very impressed about within my profession is that they're bringing back mindful meditation. And mindful meditation is a way to to heal the brain, literally, because when these disconnects occur,
so that's reconnecting the neurons.
Yes, when these disconnects occur early on, then the brain doesn't get a chance to fully, healthfully form. And so by going back into another form of connection, which is a connection to, some call it God, some call it source, some call it universal energy, some call it mindfulness. It doesn't matter. But when there's that other pathway, if you will, to a connection beyond the disconnects of life itself, then a healing process begins to occur, and these brain cells and the dendrites and the neurotransmitters start to heal and wake up again, and it's really, really encouraging, because that means to us that even if we're screwed from the beginning, there's still hope, because we can still physiologically and psychologically build ourselves back.
Yes, you can. And as I've said before, it's not how you start that matters. It's how you finish. It's the ending, right? I mean, you could start poor and end rich. I mean, that doesn't matter how you started. It's how it ends.
And like Sonia says, it's a process, isn't it?
It's definitely a
right?
journey. Yep.
Yes.
But then here is, why is happiness a state of mind? It's a tricky situation, because happiness isn't just one state of being. It's a mentality. Happiness is simply a byproduct of a living and loving and meaningful life. There is no guide, no rules, no manual that will teach you how to have and live a happy life. True happiness comes from surrounding yourself with people who you love and love you in return. So again, we're talking about human connection. One of the biggest challenges in life is learning to accept people for who they are. Right?
That's a big challenge,
Yes,
right?
it is. If there is something that is not bringing value or meaning in your life, get rid of it. Do not feel obligated to hold on to something that is only making you miserable. You owe it to yourself to lead the best possible life you can. You know, it was one thing quite a while ago, I had a life coach, and they were talking about the concept of loyalty. And someone can be loyal, but what was really a paradigm shift for me was we as individuals need to be loyal to ourselves.
Beautiful.
And I think many instances, we stay loyal to situations, to people and things because ultimately they're not healthy. But you need to look inward and say, I need to be loyal to me, and this situation, this individual isn't really helping that, and you need to just make modifications. You and only you are in control of your happiness, and when you choose to expand your mind and focus on the good, you'll be happier.
And one other thing that I wanted to bring up is that sometimes when we wake up in the morning, and I've talked to many people and I've experienced this myself, when we're sleeping, our defense mechanisms go down. And so if we've been wounded, particularly when we have these primitive narcissistic injuries and we're coming out of a sleep state, it may seem that we may experience more anxiety and more depression right at the beginning of the day. And if we can remember that this is a temporary situation as we begin to move and shower and perhaps exercise or meditate or eat or come in contact with our fellow human beings, that mental state, if you will, can just kind of dissipate over time. And so that we have to remember that nothing is permanent. Nothing, no thought, no particular emotion is permanent, because it's fluid. And just by accepting that, simply by bringing more acceptance to who we are and how we are, and having what I call self-empathy, and creating a holding environment to ourselves, about ourselves, then we're doing something that perhaps Mother failed to do, which was to attune to us and to be empathically connected to us and remind ourselves that we can do it for ourselves.
And I think that's part of the problem of why there's more human disconnect, is because we're so, we wake up in the morning and we turn on the television, or, we're sitting there staring at our smartphone all day, or we're on the computer. In other words, we're trying to be connected and do what we do, but in that we're less connected with those around us, and most importantly with ourselves.
Yeah, and I had a patient recently. He is a BPD, borderline personality disorder, and he was describing what it was like for him when he was a little boy, and he would try to play with a truck, let's say, some kind of toy, and he'd say, "Mommy, Mommy, come play with me," and Mommy would play with him for 2 seconds, and then she would be out doing something else, or she'd be on the telephone, or she'd be on the computer or something.
So she abandoned him.
She abandoned him emotionally. And speaking of happiness, I mean, the joy in this little boy just eked out of him, just flowed out of him, and the darkness in his eyes, just the way he was describing it, you could see that the light was actually closing down. So remembering that when we look into each other's eyes, when we have the connection and conversations that acknowledge what the other person is saying, and we have that, we call it that the interconnected back and forth, then something happens to us that feels like our heart is in a joyous state. And maybe we call that happiness.
Well, it's interesting that this article goes on, is you can do things that will make you happy in a sense by gauging a situation. But the thing is, if something either brings us pain or it's going to bring us pleasure. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that what that brings us pleasure is what we should dedicate more of our time to. Mm-hmm. We all run away from pain and seek pleasure, and sometimes we can be a little more pleasure seeking. Mm-hmm. But that's the point, is if there's something that's causing pain and you have a little more control of it, you might want to consider changing it or getting rid of it. I mean, happiness is not something that will be delivered on your doorstep. Embrace the journey and the lessons that we learn from it.
And don't you think, too, that we have to be reasonable, that we cannot, we have to acknowledge that life sometimes is very, very painful. And you said something a few times on the show, which is oftentimes we compare other people. Say it. I love the way you say it.
Sometimes people base their happiness on things, and what I find I talk to people is, and this was actually listed in a couple of things, and I can tell we're going to be continuing this discussion next time and bring this out more, but the problem is, a lot of us are looking at other people, and we are comparing our worst to their best. And that comparison is always a lose-lose situation, because you're never going to win in that. I mean, someone else is trying to put their best foot forward, and they're looking their best. They may be absolutely miserable and unhappy inside.
But we like to have a facade.
Put on that facade. And you're sitting there comparing yourself in an unfair situation and unfair comparison, and it's not right.
Have you ever gone on Facebook and you feel like you don't look good that day, and then you open up the your Facebook page and everybody's looking so hot that day, right?
They're looking hot, or
like,
they're happy,
what?
or they're doing stuff that, gosh, I wish I was doing that.
Right.
And it's like, well, you know what? That was what they did for like 5 minutes that day, and who knows what they did for the rest of the day. Exactly.
But it's a moment in time. We capture our best moment in time.
And then lastly here, focusing on the present moment is critical. If you spend your time wallowing in the past or worrying about the future, a lot of us worry about the future, and you know what? That in some respects, some of us believe if you be a law of attraction, you actually somewhat may attract it. You're only going to stress yourself out. Actively engage yourself in what you're currently doing and immerse yourself fully. Appreciate the fact that you are able to do whatever you are doing, and realize how fortunate you are in shaping your own life. A lot of it also talks about the attitude of gratitude, being grateful for, waking up in the morning and being grateful that you've got a bed and a blanket and a pillow and a place to sleep and a roof on your head. Very simple stuff, but you know what? It's important. Learn to depend on yourself rather than others for your fulfillment. Only once you are happy on your own can you hope to share your happiness with others. If you don't, your unhappiness will resurface and manifest itself in destructive ways. You can't hope to have any sort of successful relationship, whether it's a platonic sense or romantic sense or business sense, if you aren't comfortable with yourself. How do you ever expect any relationship to flourish?
Very, very good points. And also just back to the biochemistry of it, because we're psycho-neurobiological creatures.
We are.
I like that word, psycho-neurobiological creatures. And so when we ingest foods that unbalance us, the sugars, the neurotoxins, and so on when we're not exercising. And I don't think the psychological profession talks enough about this. And I do. I bring this into the therapy because you can't really expect to feel good if you're eating like crap, if you're not moving around and doing some form of exercise, if you're not taking care of yourself physically. We have to remember that ultimately we're animals.
Yes,
and
we are.
So,
and we did an early show. If you want to go check out our previous shows, we did a show on food and mood. So we've touched on this, and it's true. And it's interesting. There's an article, and this is probably our last one before we have to shrink that tune. Is the best benefit of exercise? Happiness. Because there's two primary chemicals involved in making exercise feel good: cortisol and endorphins. Now, cortisol is a hormone produced in the body under stress, such as anger, anxiety, and fear, and it ultimately inflames and damages our organs. Exercise burns cortisol and thereby makes us healthier and happier. And then endorphins, which, of course, we all know what that is like morphine-like hormone molecules that enter the brain neurons and park on receptors that normally send pain-signaling molecules back to other parts of the brain. Some say endorphins are more powerful and yield a more euphoric feeling than opaque drugs, such as morphine and opium, which, of course, do the same thing. So exercise stimulates the brain and releases this stuff and helps us out. And if you're doing it outside, even if you're just going for a walk, you're out with nature, you're just, it doesn't matter whether it's raining or not. I mean, just get out and get moving.
And also, I just wanted to say, for those of you who are not in LA or the LA vicinity, I am now offering phone therapy as well as one-on-one therapy, and I want to reach out to as many people as I can. And I know some of my colleagues will say, ooh, phone therapy, you're not going to be as connected. I've done some really, really great work on the phone, and now we have Skype.
And we're working on a format to do it through Skype, which should be up probably in the next 30, 45 days or so, month and a half.
Yes, a mind map therapy where we can actually go through a process where we're going to show you how to locate the wound, your reaction, and your negative encodings, and how to take that apart and recode yourself so that you're not left with the damage of the past.
And so if you can hear this voice or listen to the show anywhere in the world through Skype, you'll be able to connect with Dr. Judy and improve whatever challenges you're facing, happiness or not.
So we're going to shrink that tune, aren't we?
It is our time for us, and next week we will be continuing our discussion on happiness. We've got some great stuff. One of the things that's a twist, I'll just give you a little teaser, is that 6 things that happy people never do. I mean, they're always telling you things to do to be happy. How about stuff not to do to be happy? I thought that was an interesting twist, so we'll address that next week. Okay. The song we're going to shrink today is, I'm going to read the song, and Dr. Judy's going to interpret it through her mind map, is Back in the High Life Again by Steve Winwood. It's one of my favorite songs from way back, but it's worth addressing here. So it used to seem to me that my life ran too fast, and I had to take it slowly. Just make the good parts last. But when you're born to run, it's so hard to just slow down. So don't be surprised to see me back in the bright part of town.
So first of all, I love this song, Steve Winwood, just such a beautiful song. And I thought about the high life, which is the happiness. You know, we're high, we're low. And in this case, these words are talking about life running on so fast, and sometimes to really appreciate it and take in the moment and be able to integrate and take down our boundary a little bit so that we can ingest something good. We've got to slow down and stop running and not be so surprised to see that we've got to, you know, just kind of take it all in a little bit more with with ease. Slowness.
Well, and the joke and the cliche phrase, which is true, is stop and smell the flowers, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we're all running, and we wonder why we're exhausted and not happy. I'll be back in the high life again. All the doors I closed one time will open up again. I'll be back in the high life again. All the eyes that watched me once will smile and take me in.
So in terms of the mind map and the lens through which I see things, all the doors close one at a time. I think of that as the wounds of childhood. Everything is becoming dark and closing down, and that's the disconnect. And the hope is that they will open up again, and this time all the eyes will be watching with a smile and take me in, meaning that rather than that double dungeon of darkness that we create in phase one of part one of our life that our parents create within us, that there will be a much more welcoming world, smiling and attuning to us and mirroring us in our joy.
And I'll drink and dance with one hand free. Let the world back into me. And on I'll be a sight to see back in the high life again.
Right, and so the sight to see is the person really wanting to be seen rather than to hide.
Yes.
And the joy of being seen, when you're seen, what do you want to do? You want to drink, you want to dance, you want to be free, and you want the world to back into you. Meaning, I interpret that as sort of like the world coming to you rather than you always have to work so hard to get the attention of the world.
And I'll drink and I said, you used to be the best to make life be life to me, and I hope that you're still out there and you'll like you used to be. We'll have ourselves a time and we'll dance till the morning sun, and we'll let the good times come in, and we won't stop till we're done.
A lot of times I talk about the permeable and non-permeable membranes of the self, and just letting things come in. When we've been damaged, we close up like a clam, or on the other side of the coin, we may not have great boundaries and let just any old garbage come in. And in this case, opening up so that the good times come in, and then also the aspect of to make life be life to me. You used to be the best to make life be life to me. Again, we're talking about a relationship. What lights this person up is the relationship.
Absolutely. We'll be back in the high life again. All the doors I closed one time will open up again. We'll be back in the high life again. All the eyes that watched us once will smile and take us in. And we'll drink and dance with one hand free and have the world so easily. And will be a sight to see back in the high life again.
Right. Happiness being interconnection, good mirroring, the world being a welcoming place where there is an opportunity for self-expression and freedom and joy. In that kind of world, a welcoming world.
Hey, sign me up. And that's our show, folks. If you want to have some questions or a song you want to have a shrink on the show, you can write us at info@DrJudyWTF. Again, you can pull our stuff at Stitcher and iTunes. Just do a search of Dr. Judy and you'll find us. And that's our show. Thanks for listening. Until next time, we will be talking more on happier times. And I'm Walt Lusk, your host, and of course, been Dr. Judy Rosenberg. Take care, everyone, and here's our tune.